right, so we're going to do something a little bit different tonight. We're going to do some knife skills and some knife sharpening. So I'm going to teach you about how to keep your knife sharp, what a steel is, what a whetstone is. So we're going to go over how to keep your knives sharp, how to get them sharp, and then we're just going to do a bit of knife skills bit. So we're not actually going to be cooking anything tonight, but I just wanted to do something a little bit different, a little bit easier for you guys just to see, and also very important to learn. All right? So I think we're going to I think that's about it for now, and we'll get started. Okay, so everybody knows this is a knife, yeah? So I'm sure you have a few at home. They may be sharp, they may be dull, depending on how well you take care of them, how old they are, and such. It's very, very important as chefs when we cook that we have our knives as sharp as possible, because dull knives are dangerous. So the saying in America at one of my old jobs was, sharp is safe, dull is dangerous. If your knife is dull, you're gonna end up putting more effort and more pressure and more oomph while you're trying to cut something, and then there's more risk of you hurting yourself. So if this knife is really, really dull and I'm trying to cut something and it's just not going through, and then that's when accidents happen. But if you have a really, really sharp knife and it goes through the food with no problem, no effort, then there's less chance of you hurting yourself, cutting yourself. So sharp is safe, dull is dangerous. So I know that when we go to the shop and we buy a new knife, it's amazing, it's really, really sharp, right? You get it out of the package, you come home and you use it for the first time, really, really sharp, really, really great. But about a month after that, then you start struggling getting through things and you're really starting to push, and then you know you got those knives that you got 3 years ago and they won't cut through anything. So there's a few different ways that we can keep our knives sharp, and then sharpen our knives and then keeping them sharp. So I want to make sure that you guys understand the difference between sharpening a knife and then keeping it sharp, because they're two separate things. So you might have seen something like this. This is a steel. So I'm sure we've all seen Gordon Ramsay when he's getting ready to go into the kitchen nightmares and he's doing this thing. And he's doing this really, really fancy, really, really fast. This is a steel. And what this does is it hones the blade. So this doesn't actually sharpen your knife, it just hones it. Then you have things like this. These are like little handheld sharpener things. Those are all right for in a pinch. They'll sharpen your knife a bit. Or if you want to take it to the next step, you have things like this. This is a whetstone. So this is the ultimate in sharpening your knives. So this is 1,000 grit on the red. So you would use the red side if it was really, really dull and you really needed to work an edge. So let's say you broke the tip off your knife. They don't let you loose, yeah. So the red side is really good for really, really dull knives, or if you have a big nick out of it or a big bend or you broke your tip off, this will grind it away. And then the white side, which is 6,000 grit, is a lot smoother. So think of it like sandpaper. So this is the smooth side. So that'll really, really get the fine details. But, so what's the difference between sharpening and honing? So, let's see how we can do this. So, you got two types of knives, or knife blades. So let's imagine that this is a really close-up shot of the tip of your knife. Let's say this is the microscopic view of your knife. So this is what a really sharp knife looks like. But after you use it for a while, you start to get little barbs and little, like, we're looking at this like microscopically. So you start to get little deviations on the knife as you use it, as you go along. And that is making the knife a little bit dull. So that's when the steel comes in, or the honing. So when we run the knife on the steel, all that is doing is pushing those bits of metal back into alignment. So that's not actually sharpening the knife. It's just getting rid and honing and bringing all those little tiny imperfections back to a sharp blade. Okay, so that's preventative maintenance. You do this a lot, like daily, like using your knife several times a day, so that'll keep your knife sharp. Well, let's say that your knife is dull. So if you look under a microscope, you got a knife edge like that. That's not very sharp, is it? But just running this along that isn't gonna do anything because it's just a piece of metal, so that's not gonna do anything to that. So, use my skills here. So we have to imagine that there's a sharp knife inside of that. So when we use a sharpening stone, or sometimes a diamond steel, because it's diamond, it'll sharpen it a bit. When we use the whetstone, that is grinding away metal to form a new edge. So you take that rounded, dull knife blade, and then you grind it, you put it on the whetstone, and that makes a nice new edge. So basically, if you had this knife, I've had this knife for 15 years just about. If you do it too much, you're gonna end up with a lot smaller knife because you are grinding away some of the metal. But that's the difference between when you hone it, it's just everyday little imperfections as you chop, as you do it, you use the steel just to flatten those out and keep that edge. But when it's really dull, really dull, you gotta do the big job of grinding, sharpening, and getting that sharp edge back. So that's the difference between a steel and like a whetstone, or sometimes they've got your little handheld ones like this will grind some of the knife away and do that. So, how do we do this? So if you're a beginner with a sharpening, with knife sharpening, and you want to use a steel, the beginner way to do it is to set it on the table like this and just kind of give it like, run it along the steel like this. Really safe, beginner way. But what you want to imagine, you need to keep the correct angle of what the knife is sharpened at. So usually it's about a 45-degree angle like this. So I want to run it along the steel at a 45-degree angle just to keep the angle of the knife blade and just to straighten and bring it back to sharp. If you're more advanced, you can do like this. If you're a beginner, I always suggest going away from yourself like this. You can do a few passes on each side, just like that. And if you are more advanced, you might do it like this. And if you're the master, you get it on the downstroke and you get it on the upstroke. So this is just if you want to show off. Don't worry, make sure that you have your hand below that because that'll keep your knife from hitting you. When I first started out, I saw somebody give themselves a good one like that. So this will just keep your knife sharp. So if you see me in the kitchen at work, I might do this, 5-6 times a day in between jobs because it's just keeping that sharp. So you do one job, at work we're chopping a lot of stuff. We'll just do a quick one, just get it back to where it needs to be, and then we go on. But let's say your knives are super dull. And you can have the most expensive knife and it can still be dull. So it's not about how good your knife is or how expensive it was. You can get the cheapest knife really sharp, or you can have the most expensive knife dull. It's just how you take care of it and how you sharpen it. So with a stone, the way this works, it's called a whetstone. You need to soak this in water for about 10 minutes before you use it, and water is your friend. So we need to keep this wet. And what this does is as you sharpen your knife along this, the stone and the water forms a grit basically. So that is what helps sharpen your knife. So you're gonna get basically a paste of the stone and water. So get this nice and wet. You wanna keep a nice wet cloth underneath it so it doesn't slide as well. But now basically, if we think about the angle, so basically we run our knife across this, and this is actually sharpening it. This is eating away at the metal and making a new edge to where the steel is just basically bringing the edge back together. This makes a new one. So there's lots of different techniques you can do this. The most important thing about this is to make sure you got the angle right. Basically, it doesn't matter if you get it perfect to the angle that it was before. It's just basically, if you're gonna do it, you gotta keep the angle the same. So if it's not quite the same as what it was before, it's all right, but as long as you keep it consistent. One of the ways that you can kind of get a good idea of the angle is you can put like 2 pennies underneath the blade here, and that'll kind of give you an idea of what the angle is. You just kind of get the feel for that angle, and you just try to keep it at that angle, keep it at that angle. And then when you go to the other side, you try, imagine 2 pennies on that side, and just keep that angle and keep that angle. So this part is a bit time consuming. So we've got our 45-degree angle here. You kind of want to pull. So when I'm pushing forward, I'm not pushing down, but when I'm pulling towards myself, that's when I'm putting pressure, because you want to grind it away. So if you're grinding it towards itself, it's not as good, but you kind of want to grind away to get that knife sharp. So I'm just working my way down the full length of the blade. And this isn't too expensive, something that you can have in your house. I think I got this on Amazon for about 15 pounds. So they're not that expensive, and they last years. I just bought this one this year. The one I had before that, I had for about 10 years, and I used it so many times that it was really hollowed out. So I finally got a new one, but these last for years and years and years. So if it starts feeling a little bit dry, you just keep your water next to it, and it's all about forming that paste. So I might take, 2-3 minutes on a side. And then we'll start to see a paste form. So if we want to get our whiteboard again here. So let's imagine we've got our dull blade again. So we're sharpening, and we're grinding that off. We're grinding that off. We're grinding that slowly, 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 grinding, 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 grinding. And then, if you look, we're grinding that away. We've got one sharp edge there. So now you've got one sharp edge, and you're gonna kind of have this lip that hangs over that way if you're looking at this like microscopically, like that. So you ground all that side. And so then we wanna take it to the other side and grind and grind and grind and grind and grind and grind and grind. So the red side does it really, really rough, really, really abrasive. And then when you switch over to the white side, that's a lot smoother and a lot finer, and it's gonna give you a lot finer detail, and you use that a lot. So when we switch over to the white side, we'll do the same. And we'll start to see a bit of gray, dark gray forming. And that's basically making a paste. And I'm keeping that angle as good and as consistent as I can. And I come on the other side and I try to keep that angle 2 pennies. As consistent as I can. And this is what can take a really, really dull knife and bring it back to razor sharp. You only got to do this, I think when I'm working full time in a kitchen, I might do this once a month, once every 2 months. Because if we use our stone, it's like preventative maintenance. It'll keep it sharper for longer, but when it finally needs it, this is how you get your knife really, really, really sharp. And you can kind of make a day out of it. You can do all your knives at once. So the other side. You can see this grit is forming, so that's what's sharpening the knife. So let's say that you've got a really nice knife that you got a big nick out of, that you you dropped it, or you bumped it up against something, or somebody borrowed it and messed it up, or you broke the tip off of it. This is how you can bring that tip back. And if it starts to dry out, we just put a little bit more water on it. Just like that. And you can do this for as long as you want, but the longer you do it, the sharper it's gonna be. Think of it like sandpaper. Get that tip nice and good. And this is a lot quicker than I would normally do it. I would take some more time, but just keep it at an angle. Just imagine 2 pennies. Once you get a hang of it, you'll be able to keep that angle really, really easily. And then give it a nice rinse, because you want to get all that metal off. So that's how we bring a knife back to sharp. Then you can kind of feel how sharp it is by giving it a little touch on the palm of your hand there. Or I always freak people out by running it across my thumbnail. When you run it across your thumbnail, you can feel where there's any rough spots. So if I run it across my thumbnail and it's really, really smooth, and then I feel it catch a little bit, I know that that's a little bit rough. And so I can kind of get an idea of where I need to sharpen it a little bit more. So I just run it across the top of my nail. This is a bit advanced, but that's just how you can really tell where your knife needs sharpening. All right? And then once that's done, probably just give it a quick little run on the steel. So like again, if you're a beginner, just like this. But again, that's not gonna sharpen your knife. It's gonna keep it sharp. That's what sharpens it. So just with a little bit of time that I spent on that, it's definitely a lot sharper, okay? But we wanna make sure our knives are as sharp as possible, because sharp is safe, dull is dangerous, all right? All right, so that's knife sharpening. You can get a lot more into it, but that's just the basics of it. Again, a whetstone is not very expensive. So if you want to pick up one, it's about 15, 20 pounds on Amazon. Hopefully that'll help you keep your knives a bit sharper. Or if you have dull knives, get them sharper. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me, message me. If you want to know more about getting a whetstone or things like that, just let me know. So if you want to see more, just check out the YouTube channel and subscribe and help support that. Keeps me busy. Yeah, and I'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy.